the chief's wife and the gatekeeper. The palace of Chief Obidike stood like a monument of pride and power at the heart of the village, its red brick walls stretching high as if to touch the skies, its gates carved with symbols of conquest and strength. It was a home of wealth, tradition, and authority, yet beneath the glitter of coral beads and the thunder of talking drums, the palace carried within it whispers of secrets too heavy to be told. Chief Obidike was a man every villager feared and respected. He was a man of titles, a man of land, and a man of wives. With every passing season, he took on new responsibilities and more wives, each chosen carefully for beauty, alliance, or the pride of his household. But among them was Adaora, his youngest wife, as radiant as the morning sun and as graceful as a river in the early rains. She was the flower of the palace, her laughter once the sweetest sound within its walls. Yet her laughter had grown faint, her beauty wasted in loneliness, for the chief, though he commanded wealth and admiration, had neglected the woman who once burned with love for him. Obidike's life was consumed with councils of elders, land disputes, and the charms of his older wives who busied themselves with maintaining their place in his favor. Adaora, though adorned in the finest wrappers, though decorated with beads that sparkled like fireflies, found her days drowned in silence. A young woman of passion and dreams, she wilted like a flower locked away from the sun. And as loneliness grew, temptation crept quietly through the gates of the palace. The gatekeeper, Chike, was a young man whose strength was known by all who passed the palace walls. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin glowed with the shine of youth, and his eyes burned with the kind of intensity that made hearts quiver. His duty was to guard the gates, but his presence became something more in the eyes of Adaora. It began with fleeting glances, her gaze falling upon him as he stood tall in the sunlight, his spear at his side. From her balcony, Adaora would steal moments watching him, her heart beating with a strange rhythm she could not name. Chike, too, felt the weight of her eyes, and when their glances met, something unspoken passed between them. At first, it was harmless, stolen smiles when no one was watching, polite greetings that carried more warmth than they should, words exchanged quickly in the safety of dusk. But desire, once awakened, is like fire, it consumes everything it touches. Adaora's heart, starved of love and affection, began to beat only for the young gatekeeper. And Chike, though fearful of the danger, could not resist the queenly beauty of the chief's wife who looked at him not as a servant, but as a man. One night, when the crickets sang and the moon spilled silver light over the palace walls, Adaora could no longer resist the pull of her heart. She slipped past the servants' quarters, her silk wrapper tied tightly around her body, her steps trembling with both fear and longing. Chike sat by the gate, half asleep, until her shadow touched him. He rose quickly, startled, and bowed deeply. "My lady," he whispered, his voice shaking. But Adaora lifted her hand and pressed it gently against his cheek. "Call me Adaora," she breathed, her eyes locking with his. That moment shattered every boundary of tradition. Under the tall palm tree by the palace gate, with the moon as their witness, they surrendered to the forbidden. Passion burned through the night as they embraced, their bodies tangled in what should never have been. Adaora found the warmth she had long been denied, and Chike, though bound by duty, gave himself to the fire of her touch. They became prisoners of a love that could never be spoken, a love both beautiful and dangerous. But secrets do not sleep forever. Weeks passed, and the whispers began. The palace maids noticed the glow that returned to Adaora's cheeks, the spark in her eyes, the way she hummed while she walked. The oldest wife, Mama Ifeoma, who had long despised Adaora for her youth and beauty, sharpened her suspicion like a blade. She watched her rival closely, her eyes missing nothing. One night, with the cunning of a serpent, Mama Ifeoma followed Adaora, her heart racing with both jealousy and malice. She hid in the shadows as Adaora and Chike embraced under the moon. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the betrayal unfold before her eyes. Rage, triumph, and hatred swelled in her heart. At last, she had the weapon she needed to destroy Adaora. At dawn, The council was summoned. The air in the palace courtyard was heavy, drums beating slowly as the elders gathered. Chief Obadiah sat upon his throne, his face carved in stone, his staff of authority in his hand. Mama Ifeoma stepped forward, her voice dripping with venom as she told the tale of betrayal. Your wife, Adaora, has defiled your bed with the very man who guards your gate. The chamber erupted in shock. The elders murmured in disbelief, some in anger, others in disgust. Chief Obadiah's face darkened like a storm, his chest rising with fury. He turned his gaze upon Adaora, who stood trembling, her wrapper clutched tightly around her body, tears streaming down her face. Is this true? He thundered, his voice shaking the walls. Adaora fell to her knees, her tears falling upon the floor. Forgive me, my husband, she wept. Loneliness led me astray. Your arms have not known me in many moons. I am guilty, but I am also broken. Her words pierced the chief's heart like a spear, for deep inside, he knew the truth of them. He had neglected her, forgotten her, abandoned the love he once promised. Yet tradition was merciless, and mercy for betrayal was weakness. Guards dragged Chike forward, beaten and bound, his face bruised but his eyes unbroken. The council roared in anger. Kill him! They cried. Let his blood cleanse the shame from the chief's household. Adaora screamed, throwing herself over Chike's broken body. Her cries shook the palace walls as she clung to him. If he dies, I die with him, she shouted, her voice echoing with desperation. The chief trembled, torn between rage and sorrow, tradition and truth. He looked at his council, at Mama Ifeoma's triumphant face, and at Adaora, the woman he had once loved so deeply, the woman who now begged for mercy at his feet. For the first time, he saw clearly the cost of his pride. He saw the flower he had locked away from sunlight, and how it had withered until it sought warmth in forbidden soil. But a ruler could not be weak. Obadiah raised his staff, his voice booming through the silent chamber. Chike shall not be killed, but he shall be banished from this land, never to return. And Adaora, though she remains my wife, shall live as a shadow in this palace, a woman who betrayed her oath. The elders nodded, satisfied. The guards dragged Chike away, his chains clattering like funeral drums. His eyes met Adaora's one last time, filled with love and sorrow, before he disappeared through the palace gates. Adaora's wail pierced the air, her arms reaching helplessly toward him, her body collapsing on the cold palace floor. The palace returned to silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of wounds that never heal, of hearts broken beyond repair. Adaora lived on, her beauty now shadowed by grief, her eyes hollow, her laughter gone forever. Chike's name lingered on her lips, whispered into the night as she stared at the empty palm tree that had once been their sanctuary. And Chief Obadiah, though he wore his beads and carried his staff, felt the weight of his own emptiness. For he had lost more than a wife, he had lost the soul of his household. And so, the palace stood tall, but within its walls lay a story of love forbidden, betrayal revealed, and a wound that tradition could not heal. The lesson is clear: when love is starved, temptation finds its way. When pride builds walls, hearts suffocate. Tradition may hold a family together, but without care, without compassion, it becomes a prison. Power without tenderness breeds loneliness, and desire without restraint brings destruction. Let us learn that true love must be nurtured and tended like a garden, for a neglected heart will always search for warmth even in forbidden places.